Well, Sabbath greetings to every one of you on this very foggy Friday night. It is very foggy out there. I hope you've had a wonderful, wonderful week. It's been a very interesting week here. It's been a good week, challenging in some ways, but also very encouraging in other ways. So, won't go into all the detail, but anyway, that's been kind of a synopsis of my week. Interesting, challenging, but encouraging overall. So I hope your week has gone very well. We got back last Sunday from our trip to New York City, and hope you had the chance to see the Sabbath Greetings video last week with Christian and Nicole. And I know it was too brief, but I was happy that they were willing to do that and just speak to you guys for, even if it was just for a few minutes. I hope you enjoyed that, and we really enjoyed visiting them. And of course I could go into everything that happened there later on in the trip. We had a great trip, but then unfortunately they had quite a bit of sickness pass through, just the flu, and it happened on the Sabbath and then on Sunday as well. So anyway, that was they were so gracious, and they were, even though they were sick and everything, we really appreciate them very much, and very happy that we had the opportunity to be there and spend some time with them and those two boys. And it was wonderful to be able to see them and see how well cared for they are by the nurses and the staff there at the facility they're in. Also talked to, it was Dr. Goodrich's nurse practitioner. I think she's something, I'm not exactly sure what her title is, but she was a wonderful, wonderful lady, so down to earth, wonderful and easy to talk to, and I think she was very encouraged to see how things, obviously she was very encouraged to see how things worked out with the boys. So she still comes around and checks on them quite a bit, and certainly considers the McDonalds to be friends, and so that was wonderful in that way too. So, well, anyway, the trip was great, but we're back, and we're, back in the, hopefully, somewhat back in the swing of things here this week, and trying to make progress here towards a big Super Sabbath. We'll plan on being in Milwaukee this Sabbath for our Super Sabbath, where we have Spokesman's Club, and we'll also have game night at our home. And so we look forward to all of that, those things that we have planned for this weekend. So we're looking forward to that, looking forward to seeing the brethren in Milwaukee. The rest of you, you're certainly free to come to game night and all those festivities, the activity there. But if I don't see you, I look forward to seeing you in the weeks to come. Okay, I'm already 3 minutes into this video, so I did have just something that I won't go into all the details, but something I've been thinking about later, late this week, just in the last couple of days. Just something about the whole concept of intellect. And, sometimes we run into people that, are very intellectual. They're thinkers. They are tend to be very intelligent. And I always admire those folks, because to be frank, I mean, I haven't always been the sharpest tool in the shed, if you will, in terms of intellect. I was not terribly studious when I was in school, just in high school and that sort of thing. In college, I even had my struggles there, at least for the first year, and then finally had to get serious and apply myself, and did a little bit better. But I've always been the kind that's had to try really hard, in terms of retaining information and studying and that sort of thing. And it comes very naturally to some people. They just tend to be more intellectual. They have maybe a higher IQ. They're intelligent, and that is a wonderful thing. But I want to put it in context here of Galatians chapter 5, Galatians 5 and verse 16. And by the way, I don't always do a quote-unquote sermonette in these Sabbath greetings, but it is the Sabbath, and so I want to, if I can provide a few, a little bit of food for thought for the Sabbath, I'm not opposed to doing that either. You can always tune out if you wish to, but these are just my thoughts at the end of a busy and interesting week. Galatians 5 and verse 16, this is Paul speaking to the Galatians here. He says, I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. So it's that whole concept of the Spirit warring, lusting against the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary to one another, so that you do not do the things that you wish. So there's this situation here where it just kind of reminds me of the whole concept of just being intellectually minded versus, perhaps having a little more natural love. And there is a difference there. And intellect doesn't necessarily mean love. And love certainly doesn't necessarily, point to intellect either. But my point is here, there's a tendency for some to be sort of head converted, and we've talked about this before. They're converted in the head. They know the Bible. They can discuss it on an intellectual level. They know where this is and where that's at, and they can, really, very good at studying the Hebrew and the Greek and all this stuff. They're very intellectual, and that's wonderful. There's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes it becomes very clear that they're much more head converted than they are heart converted. It's never quite made it down to their hearts, where it actually, it affects how they act, how they respond to authority, how they interact with the world and with their coworkers and with others in general. So again, I don't mean for this to just be a full-blown sermonette, but 1 Timothy chapter 6 and 1 Timothy 6, I'm going to give you some food for thought anyway. 1 Timothy 6 and verse 20, it says there, this is the end of the letter here that Paul's writing to Timothy, and he says, "O Timothy, guard what was committed to your trust." So you can just fill in your name there. Oh, whoever. Guard what was committed to your trust, avoiding the profane and idle babblings and contradictions of what is falsely called knowledge. By professing it, some have strayed concerning the faith. Grace be with you. Amen. And so, the idea is that sometimes the intellect is stronger than the pull of the Spirit. It's that whole idea of the intellect versus love. The whole idea of the Spirit taking over the flesh. And sometimes this tendency is for the intellectual part, the knowledge part, to sort of overwhelm the pull of the Spirit, which the Spirit is love. It draws us towards that love. And those that have trouble with that, and they get into kind of this knowledge is everything thing, knowledge, and they often turn that into a very arrogant approach, a very arrogant way of dealing with things, and sometimes a very arrogant way of dealing with authority. So when any of us start relying too much on our own intellect, we certainly need to remember, if we turn over to 1 Corinthians, because, wow, Paul puts it so succinctly here. It's wonderful. I'm so thankful we have 1 Corinthians 13. 1 Corinthians 13, I'm just going to read a couple verses here. "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love." See, all this knowledge, this, even knowing all kinds of languages, which is certainly a gift. And for some, they study very hard to pick up different languages and things of that nature. But it says that if I have all these tongues of men and of angels but have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. So all of that without love is just like bang, bang, just a bunch of useless noise. In verse 2, "And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge," all of this intellect, all of this stuff in my mind, I'm so knowledgeable of the Bible and so knowledgeable about this and that, and all this intellectual prowess that I am able to display. He says here, "And have all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing." And so Paul's making a tremendous point here. Knowledge. is utterly useless if it's not being used to grow in love, if it's not being used for the betterment of our community, our society, the church, all those types of things. We're to use that to grow in love. So if we're not heart converted as well as head converted, not there's anything wrong with knowledge. It's a great thing, but not if it's not mixed with love. So then we're not fulfilling our calling if all we're focused on is being head converted and having all this knowledge and doing all these different things. I've mentioned it before. We can sit in a room all day and do nothing but study. But if we come out and we don't have love, it was all for nothing. It's a worthless waste of time. 1 Corinthians chapter 8, almost done here. 1 Corinthians 8 and verse 1, he says, "Now concerning the things offered to idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies." We do have to have a certain amount of knowledge to come into the truth of God. I mean, that's what our calling is. It's knowledge. It's mysteries revealed, and that's wonderful. But it says that knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. So whatever we do for edification, to build others up, not to tear down, not to hurt, not to criticize, but to be helpful, to be edifying. And so we know here that love edifies. If anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. So we have to be careful with that intellectual part of our nature, our character, and make sure that that's in balance, certainly, with love, and make sure that we don't pervert the flesh by discouraging and by criticizing, but we want to make sure we're lifting up, that we're building up, edifying others. So knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. So for what it's worth, I hope you can appreciate that principle anyway, and maybe give some thought to that this Sabbath. But I hope you have a tremendous Sabbath wherever you plan on keeping it. I love you all, I truly do, and I thank you for your prayers for me and for my family. I look forward to seeing many of you here for the game night, the rest of you again. We'll see you soon. I love you, take good care, and we'll talk to you again real soon.